In the small town of Maple Hills, carpenter Ethan Morgan and his son Owen struggle to rebuild their lives after Ethan's wife's death, making ends meet through his furniture business while finding solace in the tight-knit community. One rainy evening, Ethan offers shelter to a frightened woman and her 3 children, but soon discovers that Katherine Phillips is fleeing from a powerful millionaire husband, the very man who destroyed Ethan's career 8 years ago. When the enraged James Phillips tracks down his family and deploys every weapon in his arsenal, from bribing lawyers to hiring men to burn down homes, Ethan and Katherine must decide if they're willing to risk everything to protect what truly matters: the family they unexpectedly found in each other. Before we begin, write in the comments where you're listening to our stories from. Subscribe to our channel. It's free, and you can always change your mind. Enjoy the story. The sudden crack of thunder made Ethan Morgan wince as he loaded the last of his supplies into his weathered pickup truck. Rain pounded mercilessly against the metal roof of Jenkins' hardware store, the kind of unforgiving downpour that turned dirt roads into muddy rivers. Maple Hills was known for these unexpected summer storms, beautiful one moment, biblical the next. "That's gonna be a rough drive home," Old Man Jenkins commented, peering through the grimy window at the darkening sky. "You sure you don't want to wait it out?" Ethan shook his head, tucking the receipt for nails and lumber into his worn leather wallet. "Can't. I promised Owen I'd finish his treehouse this weekend." His 11-year-old son had been waiting 3 weeks for this project, and Ethan Morgan didn't break promises. Not anymore, not since Claire had died. Outside, the rain momentarily let up as Ethan made a dash for his truck, his weathered tool belt slapping against his thigh. At 38, his body carried the evidence of 15 years of carpentry work: calloused hands, a perpetual tan, and the slight stoop of a man who'd spent too many hours hunched over projects. The carpentry business wasn't what he'd planned for his life, but it had become his salvation after everything fell apart. As Ethan pulled onto the main road, the windshield wipers struggled to keep pace with the downpour. Between the rhythmic swipes, he noticed something unusual: a figure huddled beneath the small awning of the closed visitor center, surrounded by what appeared to be luggage and small shapes. He slowed the truck, peering through the rain. A woman and children. Ethan hesitated, his hand hovering over the gear shift. In a town as small as Maple Hills, strangers were rare, and strangers stuck in a rainstorm were someone's responsibility. The debate in his mind lasted exactly 3 seconds before he pulled over, cursing his inability to mind his own business. The woman tensed visibly as he approached, pulling what he now recognized as 3 children closer to her side. Her face was partially hidden beneath a soaked hood, but he could see enough to recognize the unmistakable look of fear. "You folks need a ride somewhere?" he called over the rain, maintaining a respectful distance. She didn't answer immediately, studying him with wary, exhausted eyes. Up close, Ethan could see that her clothes, though drenched, were expensive. Designer jeans, boots that had probably cost more than his monthly mortgage payment, a watch that gleamed despite the lack of sunlight. "We're fine," she finally replied, her voice carrying the polished tones of someone who hadn't grown up in a place like Maple Hills. "Just waiting for the rain to stop." Ethan glanced at the children, 2 girls and a boy, none older than 10, all looking cold and frightened. The youngest, a boy with a mop of dark curls, stared at Ethan with wide blue eyes that cut through his carefully maintained detachment. "The weather report says this won't let up until morning," he said gently, "and the visitor center's closed until May. There's a motel about 5 miles down, or—" He hesitated, knowing Claire would approve of what he was about to offer. "My place is just up the road. Warm food, dry clothes for the kids, no questions asked." The woman's shoulders stiffened. "Why would you help strangers?" Ethan looked down at his mud-covered boots, then back at the children's faces. "Because someone once helped me and my son when we needed it most." For a long moment, the only sound was the drumming of rain on the metal awning. Then the woman nodded slightly, resignation and desperation battling in her expression. "I'm Ethan Morgan," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated before accepting it, her grip surprisingly firm despite her fragile appearance. "Katherine," she said finally. "Katherine Phillips. And these are my children, Sophie, Lily, and Max." 20 minutes later, Ethan's modest two-story farmhouse was filled with more voices than it had heard in years. He moved efficiently around the kitchen, stirring a pot of homemade stew that had been simmering in the slow cooker all day. Enough for him and Owen for several meals, now repurposed to feed unexpected guests. Katherine had taken the children to the bathroom to dry off with the towels he'd provided, emerging in the 2 large t-shirts and sweatpants he'd offered. The expensive clothes had been replaced, but there was no disguising the elegant posture, the careful enunciation, the way she surveyed the modest home with concealed surprise. "Your son lives here too?" she asked, noticing the child-sized raincoat hanging by the door. "Owen's at my sister's for the night. Sleepover with his cousins." Ethan set bowls on the worn oak table. "Lucky timing, I guess. He would have given up his room anyway, but this way you and the girls can take his room, and Max can bunk with me. I've got a trundle bed." Katherine opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it, watching as her children cautiously approached the table. The stew's aroma seemed to awaken something in them, not just hunger, but a visceral memory of normalcy. "We can't impose," she began. "It's just for tonight," Ethan interrupted, not unkindly. "Tomorrow we can figure out where you're headed." The eldest girl, Sophie, perhaps 10 years old, looked up at her mother. "Mom, it smells really good," she whispered, as if seeking permission to want something. Katherine's composure faltered. "When did you all eat last?" Ethan asked quietly, ladling stew into bowls. "We had snacks at the—" "Yesterday morning," she admitted, unable to finish her sentence. Ethan nodded, pushing a basket of freshly baked bread toward the children. "Eat," he said simply. "There's plenty." As the children attacked their food with barely restrained desperation, Ethan busied himself preparing more bread and butter, pretending not to notice the tears that threatened at the corners of Katherine's eyes. She ate methodically, maintaining composure even as her hands trembled slightly around the spoon. "This is delicious," she said, the formal compliment strangely incongruous with their surroundings. "My mom's recipe," Ethan replied with a small smile. "One of the few things I learned to cook properly." The kitchen settled into an almost comfortable silence, broken only by the occasional rumble of thunder and the clink of spoons against bowls. None of them could have predicted how this simple meal would alter the course of their lives, or that the storm outside was nothing compared to what was coming. After dinner, Ethan showed them to Owen's room, a modest space with blue walls covered in solar system decals and sports posters. The boy's personality filled every corner, from the telescope by the window to the stack of science books on the nightstand. "Your son likes astronomy?" Katherine asked, running her fingers over the spine of a book about Mars. "Obsessed," Ethan confirmed with a hint of pride. "Wants to be an astronaut or a physicist. He's always been smarter than me." He showed them where to find extra blankets, towels, and the bathroom, then retreated downstairs to make up the couch for himself. As he arranged sheets and pillows, he could hear the muffled sounds of Katherine settling her children, soft reassurances, the squeak of the twin bed as bodies arranged themselves, the gentle shushing of a mother trying to calm anxious questions. Later, when the house had quieted, Ethan sat at his kitchen table with a mug of coffee, listening to the rain and wondering what series of events had brought a woman like Katherine Phillips to his doorstep. Her wedding ring was missing, but the pale indentation on her finger told its own story. The designer clothes, the cultivated speech, the haunted look in her eyes. None of it belonged in Maple Hills. The floorboard creaked, and Ethan looked up to find Katherine standing in the doorway, her arms wrapped protectively around herself. "I thought you might still be awake," she said quietly. "I wanted to thank you properly. What you did today, she paused, searching for words. People don't just take in strangers anymore. Coffee? He offered, rising to reach for another mug. She nodded, sinking into the chair across from him. For a moment they sat in silence, two strangers connected by nothing more than circumstance and hot beverages. The children are finally asleep, she said, staring into her mug. It's been a while since they felt safe enough to really sleep. The implication hung in the space between them. Ethan waited, giving her the room to say more or nothing at all. "We left 3 days ago," she began, her voice barely above a whisper. "My husband, James, he's not who people think he is." Her fingers tightened around the mug. To the world, he's brilliant, successful, generous. At home, her voice caught. At home, he's a monster. Ethan remained silent, understanding immediately. "The last time he threatened the children," she continued, looking up with sudden fierceness. "That's when I knew we couldn't stay. I won't let them grow up thinking that's normal." "You did the right thing," Ethan said firmly. "Did I?" she countered, vulnerability cracking through her composure. "We have nowhere to go, almost no money he can't track. He'll find us. James Phillips always gets what he wants." Ethan froze, the name hitting him like a physical blow. "Phillips? James Phillips of Pinnacle Industries?" Catherine's eyes widened, fear replacing vulnerability. "You know him?" The bitter taste of memory filled Ethan's mouth as a cruel symmetry of fate revealed itself. "I worked for him," he said slowly. 8 years ago, I was the safety supervisor for his manufacturing division. He fired me, blacklisted me in the industry, because I refused to sign off on shortcuts that would have endangered workers. The kitchen fell silent as the weight of Ethan's revelation settled between them. Catherine's face paled, her fingers trembling around her mug. "That sounds exactly like him," she whispered. "Anyone who stands against James becomes an enemy." A crash from the living room broke the tension. They rushed in to find Max standing beside a shattered photo frame, terror in his eyes. "I'm sorry," he cried, his small body trembling. "I didn't mean to." Ethan knelt beside the frightened boy, carefully picking up the fallen photograph of Claire, her smile forever preserved on their wedding day. "Hey, it's okay," he said softly. "It's just glass. Accidents happen." Max flinched when Ethan reached toward him, a reaction that told its own devastating story. As Ethan cleaned up the glass, Katherine gathered Max into her arms, whispering reassurances. The older children watched cautiously from the stairway, their behavior revealing patterns formed by fear. Later, after Katherine had settled the children back in bed, she returned to find Ethan on the porch, staring at the rain-washed darkness. "They're afraid of men raising their voices," she said, joining him. "Of sudden movements, of making mistakes." Her voice broke. "That's what he did to them." "And to you?" Ethan asked quietly, his hands gripping the porch railing. "The physical bruises heal," she whispered. "It's the other wounds that don't." An owl called from the darkness, its lonely sound echoing through the trees. "You know he'll come looking," Ethan said finally. Katherine nodded. "We can leave tomorrow. I won't bring his rage down on your home." "That's not what I meant." Ethan turned to face her, determination hardening his features. "You need somewhere safe, and right now, that's here. Stay, at least until you figure out your next steps." "Why would you risk that?" she asked, genuine confusion in her voice. "Especially knowing who he is?" Ethan thought of the frightened children, of Katherine's courage in fleeing with nothing, and of his own bitter history with James Phillips. "Maybe because some things are worth standing up for," he said simply. "Or maybe I'm just stubborn that way." A ghost of a smile touched Katherine's lips, the first he'd seen. "My mother would have called that righteous foolishness." "My dad would have said the same," Ethan replied, returning her smile. As they stood in comfortable silence watching the storm slowly pass, neither realized they had already formed an alliance more powerful than James Phillips's wealth or rage, one built on shared understanding and the fierce need to protect what mattered most. Inside, The children slept peacefully for the first time in months, their breathing finally deep and untroubled in the safety of Ethan Morgan's modest home. Morning light filtered through the worn curtains of Ethan's kitchen, catching dust motes that danced in the golden beams. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind a washed clean world and the earthy scent of rain-soaked soil. Ethan moved quietly through his familiar routine, measuring flour for pancakes and brewing coffee, finding comfort in the normalcy despite the previous night's revelations. He heard soft footsteps on the stairs and turned to see Katherine, her hair damp from a shower, wearing the clothes Martha from next door had discreetly dropped off earlier that morning. "I hope I didn't wake you," Ethan said, flipping a golden brown pancake with practiced ease. "I haven't slept that well in months," she admitted, hesitantly entering his space. "Can I help?" Ethan gestured toward the cabinet. "Plates are up there. Coffee mugs too, if you want some." They worked in surprisingly comfortable silence, Katherine setting the table while Ethan continued cooking. Soon, the patter of smaller feet announced the children's arrival. They appeared in the doorway, eyes widening at the stack of pancakes in the center of the table. "Good morning," Ethan greeted them with a smile. "Hope you're hungry." Max climbed cautiously onto a chair, looking uncertainly at Ethan. "Are we allowed to have some?" The innocent question revealed volumes about their past life. Ethan kept his expression neutral despite the anger building inside him. "As many as you want, buddy. There's plenty of maple syrup too. Owen and I tapped the trees ourselves last spring." As breakfast progressed, Ethan noticed how the children gradually relaxed, their movements becoming less guarded, their voices slightly louder. Sophie, the oldest at 10, kept glancing between her mother and Ethan, her observant eyes missing nothing. 7-year-old Lily remained the quietest, while 5-year-old Max seemed to respond most quickly to the safe environment, even giggling when Ethan made a pancake shaped like a lopsided star. After breakfast, Katherine insisted on washing dishes, refusing Ethan's protests. "I need to contribute," she said firmly. "I won't be a charity case." Ethan recognized the pride beneath her words. "There's dignity in accepting help when it's needed," he said quietly, "and giving back when you can." While Katherine cleaned up, Ethan took the children outside to show them the small workshop behind his house. It was his sanctuary, filled with the scent of sawdust and the orderly arrangement of tools that had become his livelihood. "Dad?" Owen's voice called from the front yard, followed by the sound of a car door closing. Ethan had almost forgotten his sister was dropping his son off this morning. "Back here," he called, watching as Owen appeared around the corner of the house, his freckled face lighting up at the sight of his father. The 11-year-old skidded to a stop when he noticed the 3 unfamiliar children. His confused gaze traveled from them to his father, silently asking for an explanation. "Owen, these are our guests," Ethan said, placing a reassuring hand on his son's shoulder. "They got caught in the storm last night. This is Sophie, Lily, and Max." Owen nodded slowly, processing this information with the careful consideration that had always been his way. "Did they sleep in my room?" he asked, more curious than upset. "They did. I hope that's okay." Owen shrugged. "Sure. Did you show them my telescope?" Just like that, the tension dissolved. With the resilience of childhood, Owen accepted the stranger's presence and immediately offered to show Sophie his prized possession. Ethan watched as the children retreated to the yard, Owen leading the way with animated gestures while explaining the basics of amateur astronomy. "He's a remarkable boy," Katherine said from behind him. She had emerged from the house and stood watching the children with a mix of wonder and sadness. "So open, so confident. He's had to grow up faster than I would have liked," Ethan admitted. "After his mom died, it was just us figuring it out together." "I'm sorry," Katherine said softly, understanding in her eyes. "Cancer," Ethan added after a moment. 3 years ago. Owen was 8. Katherine turned, recognition lighting her eyes. "That's why you understood. You've rebuilt a life too." Ethan nodded. "One day at a time." Outside, childish laughter floated through the air. Katherine moved toward the sound, like a plant seeking light. James never let them be loud, she confessed. Everything had to be perfect, controlled. Even their laughter. Ethan's jaw tightened. Children should be children. I stayed too long, she whispered, guilt shadowing her features. Convinced myself it was for their security, their future. You left, Ethan countered. That's what matters. The moment was interrupted by Owen rushing towards them, excitement radiating from him. Dad, can they stay for dinner too? I want to show them the fort in the woods. Ethan glanced at Katherine, leaving the decision to her. After a moment's hesitation, she nodded, a small smile softening her features. If it's not too much trouble. No trouble, Ethan assured her, watching as Owen led her children back to the yard, already explaining the elaborate rules of a game he'd invented. Later that afternoon, Ethan worked in his shop while the children played within sight of the house. Katherine had borrowed his laptop, saying only that she needed to check something. When she finally joined him in the workshop, her expression was grim. He's frozen our accounts, she said without preamble. Everything we had access to. And he's filed a missing persons report for the children, not for me. The implication was clear. In James's narrative, she wasn't missing. She was a kidnapper. Ethan set down his tools, anger building in his chest. He can, Katherine interrupted. His name is on everything. The house, the cars, the accounts. I have nothing but what I managed to grab before we left. She pulled a small velvet pouch from her pocket and emptied its contents onto his workbench. A diamond tennis bracelet, pearl earrings, a platinum watch. These are all I have that he can't track electronically. Enough to get us to my aunt in Colorado, maybe, if I can sell them without raising suspicions. Ethan studied her face, noting the determination beneath the fear. What about your family? Parents? Gone, she said simply. My aunt is the only one left, and we haven't spoken in years. James made sure I was isolated. A classic tactic of abusers, Ethan knew. Cut off support systems, create dependency. And your own career? Before him? I was in architectural design, she replied, a hint of pride breaking through. I had just started at a promising firm when I met James. He convinced me that supporting his career was more important, that we'd be partners in his success. Her laugh was hollow. That was 10 years ago. Now my degree might as well be written on tissue paper. The sound of a vehicle approaching interrupted their conversation. Ethan moved to the workshop door, relaxing when he recognized Sheriff Donovan's patrol car. Morning, Ethan, the sheriff called, climbing out with the unhurried movements of a man who'd known the same 20 square miles his entire life. Heard you've got company staying. News traveled faster than light in Maple Hills. Ethan straightened, wiping sawdust from his hands. Katherine and her kids needed a place. Just helping out. Donovan removed his sunglasses, his expression unreadable. Pretty lady with 3 children shows up out of nowhere. People are talking. Let them, Ethan replied evenly. Just looking out for you, Donovan said, replacing his sunglasses. Woman like that, well-spoken, those fancy mannerisms, seems out of place here. Might be running from something, or someone. That kind of trouble, Ethan said meaningfully. Understanding crossed the sheriff's weathered face. Ah, that kind? Ethan nodded once. Donovan sighed. Keep me posted if anything feels off. Sarah's putting together some clothes for the little ones. We'll drop them by later. As the patrol car pulled away, Ethan noticed Katherine watching from inside the workshop, tension visible in her posture. Sheriff Donovan, Ethan explained, approaching her. Good man. His wife Sarah teaches at the elementary school. He was asking about us, she stated. Not a question. Ethan nodded. Small towns notice newcomers, but these people look after their own. We're not their own, Katherine said softly. You are now, he replied simply. That's how it works here. Throughout the day, neighbors happened by with casseroles, children's books, and hand-me-down clothes. Mrs. Winters from the library brought application forms for library cards. Old mister, Jenkins offered Sophie a weekend job helping in his flower shop. Each visitor studied Katherine with curious eyes, but the kindness seemed genuine. It overwhelmed her, this casual generosity without expectation. "They'll want something eventually," she whispered to Ethan after Mrs. Thompson left with promises of returning with school enrollment information. Ethan shook his head. "That's not how community works here. They help because someday they might need help too." That evening, as she helped Ethan prepare dinner, she finally asked the question that had been bothering her. "Why did you stay? After what James did to your career, you could have moved anywhere, started fresh." Ethan considered as he chopped vegetables. This was Claire's hometown. After she got sick, the people here carried us through. Owen needs that stability, those connections. He smiled slightly. Besides, there's honor in simple work, building something real with your hands. The moment was interrupted by Owen bursting through the door, excitement radiating from him. "Dad, Coach Miller says Sophie, Lily, and Max can join us for swim practice at the lake tomorrow." Katherine tensed visibly. "I don't know if that's—" "Please, Mom," Sophie pleaded, appearing behind Owen. "We haven't been swimming in forever." The happiness in her daughter's voice made Katherine pause. How long had it been since her children had experienced normal childhood activities? "We'll all go," Ethan suggested gently. "I could use a break from the workshop anyway." Later, as stars appeared overhead, Ethan sat on the porch steps, listening to the nighttime chorus of crickets. He didn't hear Katherine join him until she spoke. "In Boston, my old life, we had everything. Private schools, designer clothes, vacation homes." She wrapped her arms around herself. "And my children were terrified in their own home." Ethan waited, giving her space to continue. "I thought I was protecting them by staying," she whispered. "What kind of mother does that make me?" "A survivor," Ethan answered without hesitation. "And now, a fighter." Their eyes met in the darkness, a silent understanding passing between them. Two broken people finding unexpected strength in each other's company. Neither noticed the black sedan that drove slowly past the house, its tinted windows concealing the driver who watched with calculating eyes. The clock on Ethan's nightstand read 2:17 a.m. when the scream tore through the quiet house. He bolted upright, disoriented for only a moment before racing down the hallway, instincts guiding him through the darkness. Katherine was sitting up in the guest bed, eyes wide with terror, hands twisted in the sheets. She didn't seem to see him standing in the doorway, her gaze fixed on horrors only she could perceive. "Katherine," he called softly, keeping his distance. "You're safe. You're in Maple Hills, at my house." Recognition slowly dawned in her eyes as she returned to reality. "Ethan," she whispered, "I'm sorry." "The children are still asleep," he assured her. "You didn't wake them." She nodded, embarrassment replacing fear as she became fully aware of her surroundings. "The nightmares. They come most nights." Ethan leaned against the door frame, careful to leave plenty of space between them. "Would you like some tea? I find it helps when sleep won't come." In the kitchen, the soft glow of a single lamp created an island of warmth. Katherine wrapped her hands around the steaming mug of chamomile, her breathing gradually steadying. "In my dream, he found us," she admitted. "He was taking the children away one by one, and I couldn't move." Ethan nodded, understanding the particular cruelty of nightmares. The mind processes fear in its own time. "Do you have them too?" she asked, studying his face. "Different ghosts, same haunting," he replied. "Some nights I still reach across the bed for Claire, or dream that I missed some symptom, some sign that could have saved her." The honesty in his voice created a bridge between them, spanning their different pains. "How did you manage? After she died?" Katherine asked. Ethan gazed into his tea, one breath at a time, for Owen's sake at first, then eventually for my own. He looked up. "The nights were the hardest. That's when the silence is loudest." Katherine nodded, recognizing the truth in his words. "With James, I was never alone, but always lonely. Constantly watched, criticized, controlled." She shivered. Sometimes I still feel his eyes on me." "He's not here," Ethan said firmly. "And if he comes, he'll have to go through me first." The unexpected fierceness in his gentle voice surprised them both. Katherine blinked rapidly, fighting tears. "I never fought back," she confessed, shame coloring her words. "All that education, the career I abandoned, and I just disappeared into his world, became what he wanted." "Survival isn't weakness," Ethan countered. "You protected your children the best way you knew how, and when that wasn't enough, you found the courage to leave." Dawn was approaching when they finally returned to their rooms, a new understanding between them. As Katherine settled back under the covers, she realized the weight on her chest had lightened slightly. For the first time in years, she had spoken her truth and been believed without question. Down the hall, Ethan stood at his window, watching the stars fade. As morning approached, he found himself thinking of Claire, remembering how she'd urged him to keep his heart open even as hers was failing. "Life isn't finished with you yet," she'd whispered during those final days. Looking toward the guest room where Katherine now slept, Ethan wondered if perhaps Claire had been right. The future stretched before them, uncertain and fraught with danger. But for the first time in years, he felt something besides grief stirring in his chest. Purpose. What neither of them knew was that James Phillips had already set his plans in motion. 200 miles away, he studied the GPS tracking data from his daughter's beloved stuffed rabbit, the one Katherine hadn't thought to check for a hidden device, and smiled coldly at the blinking dot centered on Maple Hills. "Found you," he whispered to the empty room, reaching for his phone to make a call. The Saturday morning sun bathed the lakeshore in golden light as families spread blankets across the sandy beach. Children splashed in the shallows, their laughter carrying across the water, while parents chatted in clusters beneath colorful umbrellas. Katherine sat at the edge of a faded quilt, watching her children with wonder. Lily and Max built elaborate sandcastles with Owen, while Sophie waded cautiously into the water with some local girls her age. "Lemonade," Ethan offered, settling beside her with 2 plastic cups. "Thank you." Katherine accepted the drink, their fingers brushing momentarily. "This all feels surreal." A month ago, the children were attending formal piano lessons and mandatory etiquette classes. Now they're catching tadpoles and coming home with scraped knees. Ethan smiled. "And which version seems happier?" She watched as Max squealed with delight when Owen showed him how to skip stones across the water's surface. No contest. Coach Miller blew his whistle, gathering the swim team for practice. Sophie looked toward Katherine, seeking permission. When she nodded encouragement, her daughter's face lit up with surprised joy as she jogged to join the others. "She's quite the natural swimmer," Ethan observed. "Owen says she's faster than most of the kids who've trained all year." Pride warmed Katherine's chest. James never approved of team sports. Too uncontrolled, too democratic. He preferred individual achievements that could be measured and showcased. Ethan leaned back on his elbows, watching the children. "Sometimes the most important lessons come from being part of something bigger than yourself." The peaceful moment was interrupted by Martha Jenkins approaching, a covered dish in hand. "Ethan Morgan, you've been holding out on us," she teased good-naturedly. "Katherine, your furniture designs are absolutely exquisite." "William showed me the sketches you did for the Miller's dining set," Martha continued. Katherine blushed. "It's just a hobby. I studied design before." "Before you became a full-time mother," Martha finished kindly. "Well, talent like yours shouldn't go to waste. Half the town's already asking if you two are taking commissions." After Martha moved on, Katherine turned to Ethan. "You showed her my sketches?" He shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "They're good. Really good. My craftsmanship and your design sense. We could make something special together." The simplicity of his belief in her abilities left Katherine momentarily speechless. James had always dismissed her creative pursuits as frivolous distractions from her duties as his wife. "We're fitting in here," she said quietly, watching Max build a sandcastle with an elderly man who was teaching him to use driftwood for flagpoles. I never thought we could belong somewhere so quickly." Ethan's eyes met hers, serious now. "You were always meant to be more than someone's possession, Katherine. You and the children." She looked away, uncomfortable with the truth that vibrated in his words. "This peace can't last forever. James won't just let us disappear." Ethan's hand found hers on the blanket between them. A gentle, undemanding touch. "Whatever comes, you don't face it alone anymore." As the afternoon sun warmed their shoulders, Katherine realized she was beginning to believe him. 3 weeks passed with remarkable swiftness. Katherine and the children settled into a rhythm with Ethan and Owen that felt both strange and natural. The children enrolled in the local school, quickly making friends in the close-knit community. Katherine began working alongside Ethan in his workshop, her design skills complementing his craftsmanship in ways that brought in more commissions than he'd seen in years. The hollow spaces in Ethan's home, once filled only with memories, now echoed with new voices, new purpose. Even Owen seemed transformed, his quiet solemnity giving way to the exuberant energy of a boy with younger siblings to mentor and impress. On this particular afternoon, Ethan wiped sweat from his brow as he placed the final beam across the workshop expansion. The structure had grown to accommodate their flourishing business. Morgan and Phillips bespoke furniture, as the modest sign now proclaimed. "Need a hand?" Sheriff Donovan called, climbing out of his patrol car. Ethan descended the ladder, noting the unusual tension in his friend's normally relaxed demeanor. "Something wrong, Mike?" The sheriff glanced toward the house where Katherine and the children were baking cookies. "Got a call from the county clerk's office. Someone's been asking questions about property records. Your property specifically." Ethan's stomach tightened. "Private investigator?" "Fancy law firm from the city," Donovan confirmed. "Phillips and Associates." The name hung in the warm afternoon air like a thundercloud. Ethan had been expecting this, but the reality still hit hard. "He found them." Donovan nodded grimly. "Likely, but I've got friends watching the roads into town. You'll have warning if anyone shows up." After the sheriff left, Ethan stood motionless in the yard, mind racing. They needed a plan, contingencies. The peaceful weeks had made it too easy to forget the threat looming beyond their small-town sanctuary. Inside the house, laughter drifted from the kitchen. Ethan paused in the doorway, taking in the scene. Max sat on the counter, face dusted with flour as he messily stirred cookie dough. Lily carefully arranged chocolate chips in perfect patterns, while Sophie and Owen debated the merits of peanut butter versus chocolate. Katherine moved among them, her smile relaxed in a way he'd never seen before. He couldn't bear to break this moment of normalcy. Later that night, after the children were asleep, Ethan placed a white envelope on the kitchen table where Katherine was sketching new designs. "What's this?" she asked, opening it to find several $100s. "Your half of the Henderson commission," Ethan explained. "We're partners now, remember?" Katherine stared at the money, the first she'd earned herself in nearly a decade. "Ethan, I can't—" "You can," he interrupted gently. "Your designs are what's bringing in these orders." She carefully set the money aside, tears threatening. "I never thought I'd feel this capable again." Ethan sat across from her, knowing he could no longer delay the difficult conversation. "Katherine, there's something we need to discuss." He told her about the sheriff's visit, watching as the hard-won peace drained from her expression. "So he's found us," she whispered, fingers trembling against the tabletop. "Not yet, but he's looking. We need to be prepared." Katherine's shoulders straightened, the fragile woman receding as the protective mother emerged. "The children need to know what to do if he comes. Safe words, meeting places." Ethan nodded, admiring her strength. "We'll make a plan together." As midnight approached, they sat side by side on the porch steps, a hastily created safety protocol between them. The night was unusually quiet, as if the forest itself was holding its breath. "I won't let him take this from us," Katherine said suddenly, her voice stronger than he'd ever heard it. "This life we're building, the children's happiness." Ethan's hand found hers in the darkness, their fingers intertwining naturally now, fear and determination flowing between them like an electric current. "Neither will I," he promised, as a distant car's headlights appeared on the far edge of town, moving slowly toward them through the night. The headlights drew closer, then veered away down a side road. Ethan's shoulders relaxed slightly, but the momentary reprieve did little to ease their growing tension. For 3 days, they'd been living on high alert, strange cars passing too slowly, hang-up calls to the landline, a feeling of being watched that neither could shake. Ethan doubled his efforts on workshop security, installing motion lights and reinforced locks. Katherine created emergency bags for each child, hidden but accessible. They developed code words, escape routes, and meeting points, all practiced as safety games, to avoid frightening the children unnecessarily. That evening, thunder rolled across the valley as Ethan finished the last of the dinner dishes. Katherine tucked her children into bed while Owen helped his father secure the windows against the approaching storm. "Dad," Owen whispered, his voice unusually serious. "I don't want Katherine and the others to leave." Ethan ruffled his son's hair. "I know, buddy. Are we going to protect them? If that bad man comes?" The directness of the question caught Ethan off guard. Sometimes he forgot how perceptive 11-year-olds could be. "We'll do our best," he answered honestly. The storm hit with unexpected ferocity. Rain lashed against the windows while lightning split the sky open. By midnight, the power had failed, plunging the house into darkness broken only by candles and the occasional flash of lightning. Ethan made one final check of the doors before settling onto the living room couch. Katherine appeared in the hallway, wrapped in a borrowed sweater too large for her frame. "The children are finally asleep," she said, sitting beside him. "The storm scared them." "Owen too," Ethan admitted, though he'd never admit it. They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the rain. Katherine's hand found his in the darkness, a gesture that had become natural between them. "Ethan," she began hesitantly, "if James does come—" "When," he corrected gently. "Men like him always come." "When he comes," she amended, "I want you to know that these weeks have been—" She struggled to find the words, "more real than anything I've experienced in years." Ethan's thumb traced gentle circles on her palm. "For me too." The moment stretched between them, fragile and precious. Katherine leaned closer, her breath warm against his cheek. Their lips were mere inches apart when the smell hit them. Acrid. Chemical. Wrong. Smoke. They bolted upright simultaneously. Ethan flung open the back door to see orange flames licking up the side of his workshop, spreading unnaturally fast despite the rain. "Accelerant," he realized aloud. "This isn't an accident." Katherine's face drained of color. "The children, get them out," Ethan ordered. "Use the front door. I'll call for help." As Katherine raced toward the bedrooms, Ethan grabbed the fire extinguisher and sprinted into the downpour. The flames had already engulfed half the workshop, spreading toward the house with terrifying speed. He fought desperately to contain the blaze, but the fire seemed to have a malevolent will of its own, consuming everything in its path. When the propane tank in the workshop exploded, the force threw Ethan backward onto the muddy ground. Through dazed eyes, he saw flames crawling up the side of the house toward the children's bedroom. A scream tore from inside, Lily's high-pitched cry of terror. Ethan staggered to his feet, ignoring the burning pain across his shoulder where embers had landed. Nothing mattered except reaching those children. As he stumbled toward the inferno, a dark figure emerged from the tree line, watching with cold satisfaction as Ethan Morgan's world burned to ashes around him. The antiseptic smell of the hospital room cut through Ethan's consciousness before he could fully open his eyes. Pain radiated across his back and shoulders, each breath a struggle against tight bandages. The steady beep of monitors formed a rhythmic backdrop to his confusion. "Ethan," a soft voice called him back from the haze. Catherine's face swam into focus, exhaustion etched into every line. Dark circles shadowed her eyes and a smudge of soot still marked her temple. Her hand rested lightly on his, careful to avoid the IV line. "The children," he rasped, throat raw from smoke. "Safe," she assured him immediately. "All of them. Owen's with Sophie at Sheriff Donovan's house. Lily and Max are down the hall with Mrs. Thompson." Relief washed over him, more powerful than any pain medication. Fragments of memory returned. Flames climbing the walls, carrying Max's limp form through choking smoke, returning again and again until all 4 children were safely outside. "The house?" he asked, already knowing the answer from the devastation in her eyes. "Gone," Katherine whispered. "Everything except the old oak tree." Ethan closed his eyes, absorbing the loss. The home he'd built with Claire, repaired with his own hands after she died, filled with memories both painful and precious, all reduced to ashes. "It was James," Katherine said, voice hardening. "The sheriff found evidence of accelerant. Professional job." "Coward," Ethan muttered. "Attacking children while they sleep." Katherine's fingers tightened around his. "You saved them, Ethan. The doctor said you shouldn't have been able to keep going back in with those burns, but you did." He had no memory of pain during those desperate minutes, only the singular focus of reaching each child. Now, however, his body reminded him with every movement of the price he'd paid. A nurse entered, checking Ethan's vitals with professional efficiency. "You're quite the town hero, Mr. Morgan," she said, adjusting his IV. "Half of Maple Hills is in the waiting room." After she left, Katherine moved closer, brushing hair from his forehead with a tenderness that made his chest tighten. "The whole town has rallied," she told him. "The church opened its shelter. People are donating clothes, toys, everything we need. Sheriff Donovan has deputies watching the hospital." Ethan nodded, exhaustion pulling at him. "You should rest too." Katherine shook her head. "I'll stay." "Katherine," he began, needing to say what might be their only chance. "If this is too much danger," she pressed a finger gently to his lips. Don't offer me an exit. Not now." The fierceness in her voice surprised him. "I've spent years running from conflict, thinking silence meant peace," she continued. "But there's a difference between peace and emptiness. What we've built here, the workshop, the designs, the family we're becoming, that's worth fighting for." Ethan studied her face, seeing not the frightened woman who had appeared at the store weeks ago, but someone stronger, someone who had reclaimed pieces of herself thought lost forever. "Besides," she added, the ghost of a smile touching her lips, "I'm not the only one who needs you anymore." As if summoned by her words, the door cracked open and 4 small faces peered in. Owen, Sophie, Lily, and Max, their eyes wide with worry and relief. "Dad?" Owen whispered. Ethan managed to smile through his pain. "Come here, all of you." As the children carefully gathered around his bed, Ethan felt something stir beneath his grief and pain. Not just determination, but hope. 4 days after the fire, Ethan was released from the hospital. The doctors had marveled at his recovery. Though deep burns across his back and shoulders would take months to fully heal, Sheriff Donovan personally drove him to the small rental cabin at the edge of town that the community had prepared for them. "Home, sweet temporary home," the sheriff announced as he helped Ethan up the porch steps. The cabin's door burst open before they reached it. Owen flew into his father's arms, careful of the bandages but desperate for the contact. Behind him stood Katherine and her children, their faces lighting up with relief. "Easy there, sport," Ethan winced but held his son close. Inside, the cabin was modestly furnished with donations from townspeople, a patchwork of chairs, beds, and kitchen items. A hand-stitched quilt hung on the wall with a simple message: "Family isn't always blood." Katherine guided Ethan to a recliner by the window. "The children are with Mrs. Winters at the library," she said, once Owen had gone to fetch water. "I wanted to speak with you alone first." The seriousness in her tone made Ethan straighten despite his pain. "James is here," she said without preamble. "In town. Sheriff Donovan confirmed it this morning." Ethan's jaw tightened. "Has he approached you?" "Not yet. He's staying at the inn, making a show of searching for his missing family." Her voice turned bitter, playing the concerned husband and father while his hired men burned down houses with children inside. Before Ethan could respond, a sleek black car pulled up outside. Katherine tensed visibly as a tall, impeccably dressed man stepped out, accompanied by another man carrying a briefcase. "That's his lawyer, Daniel Harrington," Katherine whispered. "They're coming here." Ethan struggled to stand, ignoring the pain shooting across his back. "Let them come." The knock that followed seemed to echo through the small cabin. Sheriff Donovan opened the door, positioning himself protectively in the entryway. James Phillips stood framed in the doorway, every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit. His handsome features arranged themselves into an expression of concern as his eyes found Katherine. "Thank God you're safe," he said, his voice smooth as silk. "I've been worried sick." Katherine remained silent, her body rigid with fear and anger. James's gaze shifted to Ethan, hardening instantly. "Morgan," he said coldly, "I should have known you'd be involved in this situation." Ethan met his stare evenly. "Katherine and the children are here by choice, Phillips." "Their choice," James smiled thinly. "My wife is clearly not in her right mind. Taking my children, living in—" He glanced around dismissively. "These conditions." "I am not your possession," Katherine said suddenly, her voice stronger than any of them expected. "Neither are our children." James's facade cracked slightly. "This isn't the place for this discussion, Katherine. Come home. We can sort this out privately." "Like you sorted out Ethan's home?" Elizabeth challenged. "With gasoline and matches?" James's lawyer stepped forward smoothly. "Mr. Phillips has been in the city with dozens of witnesses. These accusations are slanderous." Sheriff Donovan crossed his arms. "Funny thing about small towns, Mr. Harrington. We notice strangers, especially ones hanging around before houses mysteriously catch fire." James's expression darkened. "I came to make a reasonable offer," he said, turning to Katherine. "Return home with our children immediately, and I'll ensure Mr. Morgan receives the finest medical care money can buy. Refuse, and I'll have him arrested for kidnapping." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Katherine slowly rose from her chair, walked to Ethan's side, and placed her hand firmly on his shoulder. "Get out," she said simply. "You have no power here." The door closed behind James Phillips with a decisive click, but his presence lingered like a toxic cloud. Katherine's hand trembled where it rested on Ethan's shoulder, though her face remained resolute. "He'll be back," Sheriff Donovan warned, settling his hat back on his head. "Men like that don't take rejection well." Ethan reached up to cover Katherine's hand with his own. "We'll be ready." After the sheriff left, Katherine sank into the chair opposite Ethan, the momentary courage draining from her. "He'll use every resource he has, the children, the courts, his money." "But he doesn't have the truth," Ethan countered gently. "Or the town." The truth emerged piece by piece over the following days. James filed emergency custody petitions claiming Katherine was mentally unstable and Ethan was a dangerous influence. His lawyers descended on Maple Hills like expensive vultures, combing through Ethan's past, trying to find something, anything to use against him. What they found instead was a town united. Mrs. Thompson from the school board testified about the children's improved behavior and academic progress. Dr. Roberts documented Katherine's recovery from stress and anxiety. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who rarely left his flower shop, came to court to speak about Sophie's responsibility and work ethic. 1 week after James's appearance at the cabin, Katherine sat at the small kitchen table, staring at legal documents delivered by courier. "He's offering a settlement," she said when Ethan returned, pushing the papers toward him. Full custody of the children for me, a generous financial package, a house in any city of my choosing. She paused. As long as it's at least 500 miles from here. Ethan absorbed the implications, his heart sinking. He's trying to separate us. It's a good offer, Katherine whispered, not meeting his eyes. More than most women in my situation ever get. Ethan sat across from her, pain flaring across his healing burns. Is it what you want? What I want? She looked up, tears threatening. I want my children safe. I want to stop looking over my shoulder. Her voice broke. I want to stay here with you and Owen. I want the life we were building. Then we fight, Ethan said simply. Katherine shook her head. You don't understand what he's capable of. This cabin, the community support, it's all temporary. Eventually, people will tire of our drama. Richard never tires. He'll drag this out until everyone abandons us. Ethan reached across the table, taking her hands in his. Katherine, look at me. When she did, he continued. My entire life fell apart once before. I lost my career, nearly lost this town, and then lost Claire. But I rebuilt, not alone. With help, with community. He squeezed her hands gently. Whatever you decide, I will respect it. But don't choose out of fear. She studied his face, seeing the sincerity there, the quiet strength that had drawn her from the beginning. The children adore you, she whispered. And I them, he replied. But this has to be your choice. Not mine, not James's, yours. Katherine stood suddenly, walking to the window. Outside, fireflies blinked in the growing darkness like scattered stars. In the distance, she could see the lights of town, the church steeple, the library, where her children had discovered the joy of reading without judgment. She turned back to Ethan, something new and determined forming in her eyes. I choose this, she said firmly. I choose us. The Maple Hills Courthouse stood at the center of town, its red brick facade and white columns a testament to a simpler time when justice was administered by neighbors who knew each other's stories. Today, however, the historic building was besieged by outsiders, sleek luxury vehicles with out-of-state plates, reporters from regional news outlets, and a phalanx of expensive suits representing James Phillips's considerable legal firepower. Remember, Ethan said quietly as he and Katherine climbed the courthouse steps, they want to intimidate us. That's why all this show. Katherine nodded, squeezing his hand once before releasing it. She wore a simple navy dress borrowed from Sarah Donovan, her hair pulled back in a neat ponytail. No makeup could fully conceal the shadows beneath her eyes, evidence of another night spent rehearsing testimony and calming frightened children. Yes, Phillips. A reporter thrust a microphone toward them. Is it true you've been hiding from your husband in this small town? Mr. Morgan, called another. How do you respond to allegations that you've harbored Mrs. Phillips against her husband's wishes? Sheriff Donovan materialized beside them, creating a buffer between the press and their small procession. No questions, he barked, guiding them through the courthouse doors where the relative quiet felt like a physical relief. Inside, Ethan spotted their attorney, Rebecca Chen, waiting by the courtroom entrance. She was a striking contrast to James's legal team, one woman against 6 men, her simple gray suit against their designer wear, her single briefcase against their rolling carts of documents. But Chen's reputation as a fearless advocate for abuse survivors had preceded her, and Katherine had immediately trusted the directness in her gaze. How are you holding up? Chen asked, her expression warm but professional. Ready to end this, Katherine replied with more confidence than she felt. Chen nodded approvingly. Remember what we discussed. Phillips will try to paint you as unstable, irrational, vengeful. Stay calm, stick to facts, and keep bringing it back to the children's well-being. She turned to Ethan. And you? I know, he interrupted with a grim smile. I'm the corrupting influence, the reason she abandoned her marriage, the unstable element in her new life. Exactly, Chen confirmed. They'll go after your past, Your financial struggles after Phillips blacklisted you, maybe even your grief after your wife's death. Don't rise to the bait." As they entered the courtroom, Katherine faltered momentarily at the sight of James seated at the plaintiff's table, impeccably dressed and radiating confident authority. He looked up, meeting her gaze with the smile that had once made her heart flutter and later made it freeze. The smile that meant punishment would come later, in private. Ethan's hand at the small of her back steadied her. "He's just a man," he whispered. "Not a god, not all-powerful." The words anchored her as they took their seats. "For the children," she reminded herself. "For our future." Judge Eleanor Martinez entered, her stern face betraying nothing as she surveyed the courtroom. At 62, she had presided over the county's family court for 15 years, developing a reputation for cutting through legal theatrics to focus on children's welfare. "Let's be clear from the outset," Judge Martinez began after the preliminaries. "This court's primary concern is the well-being of the minor children. I've reviewed the preliminary filings, and frankly, I'm troubled by allegations from both sides." She fixed James with a pointed stare. "Mr. Phillips, you claim your wife is mentally unstable and has essentially kidnapped your children, yet you waited 3 weeks to file a missing persons report. Explain that." James leaned forward, his expression a perfect mask of concern. "Your Honor, I was respecting Katherine's need for space. We'd had disagreements, and I thought she'd taken the children to her aunt's home for a cooling-off period. It was only when I discovered she'd cut off contact with family friends that I grew concerned about her state of mind." "And the reason you've brought 6 attorneys and a PR team to a custody hearing in a small-town family court?" the judge pressed. "I'm a public figure, Your Honor. My business dealings are significant. I need to protect not just my family, but my reputation from these baseless allegations." Martinez made a non-committal noise and turned to Katherine. "Mrs. Phillips, you've made serious accusations of abuse against your husband, yet there are no police reports, no medical records, no documentation whatsoever. Why should this court accept claims made only after you left the marriage?" Katherine felt her mouth go dry. They'd anticipated this question, but hearing it from the judge sent a spike of panic through her chest. "Your Honor," she began, her voice steadier than she expected. "Domestic abuse thrives in secrecy. James was careful. The physical marks were where they wouldn't show, and the psychological control was gradual. I was isolated from friends and family who might have recognized the signs." She took a deep breath. "I didn't leave earlier because I was afraid, for myself and especially for my children." "And now?" Judge Martinez asked. "What changed?" Katherine's gaze flicked briefly to Ethan before returning to the judge. "2 things changed, Your Honor. First, James threatened the children directly for the first time. And second, I found a community that showed me what safety actually feels like." James's lead attorney, Harrington, rose smoothly. "Your Honor, we submit that Mrs. Phillips's community consists primarily of a man with a documented vendetta against my client, a man who has insinuated himself into her vulnerable state for his own purposes." "That's false," Ethan said sharply, before Chen could stop him. "You'll have your turn, Mr. Morgan," Judge Martinez warned. "Mr. Harrington, proceed with your opening statement, but stick to the facts." What followed was a masterclass in character assassination dressed as concern. Harrington painted Katherine as a privileged woman who'd had every advantage: the best medical care, unlimited resources for the children, a husband who supported her every whim, only to throw it away in a fit of rebellion. He described James as a devoted father, devastated by the loss of his family, a pillar of the community whose philanthropic work had improved thousands of lives. Then came the attack on Ethan, his financial struggles after losing his position at Phillips Industries, his periods of depression following Claire's death, the occasions when Owen had stayed with relatives during his darkest times. Each statement was technically true, but stripped of context and humanity, designed to portray him as unstable and vindictive. When it was Rebecca Chen's turn, she approached the podium with unruffled composure. "Your Honor, this case isn't about fancy lawyers or orchestrated PR campaigns. It's about 3 children who flinch when a man raises his voice. It's about a woman who has, for the first time in a decade, begun to reclaim her identity and dignity. And it's about a community that recognized abuse and responded with protection, not suspicion."
Enjoying our stories? Don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our upcoming content. Now let's get back to our story.
She called their first witness, Dr. Amelia Roberts, the town physician who had examined the children upon their arrival in Maple Hills. "Doctor," Chen began, "what did you observe about the Phillips children during their initial examination?" Dr. Roberts adjusted her glasses. All 3 children showed signs of anxiety, heightened startle responses, difficulty making eye contact, physical tension when asked about home life. Sophie, the eldest, displayed symptoms consistent with hypervigilance, a common response to traumatic environments. Max, the youngest, had recurring nightmares and bedwetting, which has improved significantly since their arrival here. Were there signs of physical abuse? No recent marks or injuries, but Max had a poorly healed wrist fracture consistent with a twisting injury, not the fall that was described in his medical records. James's attorney objected immediately. "Speculation, Your Honor. Dr. Roberts has no way of knowing how the injury occurred." "I'll rephrase," Chen said smoothly. Dr. Roberts, in your professional opinion, were the behaviors you observed in the Phillips children consistent with children who had lived in a high-stress environment?" Objection, leading the witness. "Sustained," Judge Martinez ruled. "Counselor, be more specific." Chen nodded. "Dr. Roberts, based on your experience treating children, what would you say about the Phillips children's emotional state when they first arrived in Maple Hills versus now?" When they arrived, all 3 exhibited classic signs of trauma: sleep disturbances, anxiety, emotional withdrawal. Now, 6 weeks later, they're like different children. They're sleeping through the night, engaging socially, and displaying age-appropriate behaviors. Max's bedwetting has stopped entirely. Sophie no longer scans rooms for threats when she enters them. And in your professional opinion, what could cause such a dramatic improvement? Dr. Roberts looked directly at James Phillips, unintimidated by his cold stare. Removal from a traumatic environment into a stable, nurturing one. The testimony continued with Martha Jenkins describing how Sophie had blossomed while working in her flower shop, Sheriff Donovan recounting the night of the fire and the evidence of arson, and Owen bravely explaining how Katherine's children had changed since arriving. "They were really scared at first," Owen said, his freckled face serious. "Max would cry if Dad raised his voice, even just calling to me from outside. Sophie checked all the doors like 3 times before bed. Now they're just regular kids." When it was Katherine's turn to testify, she walked to the witness stand with trembling legs but a straight spine. As she was sworn in, she caught Ethan's eye. His steady gaze gave her strength. "Mrs. Phillips," Chen began, "please tell the court why you left your husband." Katherine took a deep breath. The final incident occurred on June 12th. James had been increasingly agitated about a business deal that wasn't going his way. That evening, Sophie spilled a glass of water at dinner. It was an accident. She's a careful child. But James... She paused, steadying herself. James grabbed her arm so hard it left bruises and told her that accidents have consequences. When I intervened, he said that perhaps the children needed to learn what real discipline was, since I was clearly too soft. Had there been previous incidents? Many, but always directed at me, never the children. He was careful, controlled in public, explosively angry in private. He isolated me from friends and family, monitored my phone and email, controlled our finances completely. I wasn't allowed to work despite my education. The children were on rigid schedules of academic and cultural enrichment with no room for normal childhood experiences. "Why Maple Hills?" Chen asked. "Why not go to your family?" James had systematically cut me off from anyone who might help. My parents are deceased, and my aunt hadn't spoken to me in years. James had convinced me she only wanted my money. I chose Maple Hills randomly, honestly. It was far enough from Boston that James wouldn't immediately look here, but close enough that I could reach it with the cash I had managed to hide away. "And your relationship with Ethan Morgan?" Catherine's eyes found Ethan again. "When we met, I was desperate and terrified. Ethan offered help without conditions, safety for my children, shelter, and eventually, a way to support ourselves through honest work. He never asked for anything in return. He helped me remember who I was before James, a designer with ideas and talent, a mother who could laugh with her children instead of constantly fearing for them." When Harrington's turn for cross-examination came, he approached with predatory confidence. "Mrs. Phillips, you've painted quite the dramatic picture," he began, his tone suggesting skepticism. "Yet in all your years of marriage, you never once reported abuse to authorities, sought medical attention for injuries, or confided in friends. Isn't it more accurate to say you became infatuated with Mr. Morgan and invented these allegations to justify abandoning your marriage?" Katherine felt heat rise in her face. "No, sir. That's not accurate. Let's discuss your mental health history." Harrington lifted a document from his table. "You were prescribed anti-anxiety medication in 2022, were you not?" "Objection," Chen called. "Relevance goes to the witness's state of mind and reliability, Your Honor," Harrington countered smoothly. "I'll allow it, but tread carefully, Counselor," Judge Martinez warned. "Yes, I was prescribed medication," Katherine admitted, "for anxiety that developed during my marriage. Anxiety that your own doctor attributed to, and I quote, adjustment difficulties balancing household management and social obligations. Not abuse." Harrington's smile was thin. "Isn't it possible, Mrs. Phillips, that the pressure of your role as the wife of a prominent businessman simply became too much, and you're now retaliating against Mr. Phillips for expectations you couldn't meet?" Katherine gripped the edge of the witness stand. "No. I developed anxiety because I was walking on eggshells every day, trying to prevent my husband's next explosion. Yet you never mentioned this to your doctor." "James selected the doctor. He sat in on my appointments. Would you have felt safe disclosing abuse under those circumstances?" For the first time, Harrington looked momentarily discomfited. He changed tactics. "Let's discuss your relationship with Ethan Morgan. You moved into his home immediately upon meeting him. Is that correct?" "He offered shelter during a storm. We stayed because it was safe." "Safe," Harrington repeated with exaggerated thoughtfulness. "And now you're business partners, living together. Your children call him Uncle Ethan. That developed rather quickly for mere gratitude, wouldn't you say?" Katherine felt her cheeks burn. "Our partnership developed because we discovered complementary professional skills. Our living arrangement was practical, then necessary after the fire. The relationship between Ethan and my children developed because he treats them with consistent kindness and respect." "Mrs. Phillips, isn't it true that you and Mr. Morgan are romantically involved?" The question hung in the air. Katherine glanced at Ethan, whose face remained carefully neutral despite the tension evident in his jaw. "Miss Morgan and I care deeply for each other," she said carefully. "Any relationship has developed naturally from mutual respect, not from some scheme as you're implying." "How convenient," Harrington said, "that you found not only sanctuary but romance with the one man in the state who bears a significant grudge against your husband." "Objection. Withdrawn," Harrington said smoothly. "No further questions." When Ethan took the stand, his testimony was straightforward. His history with Phillips Industries, finding Katherine and her children, the development of their furniture business, and the night of the fire. "Mr. Morgan Harrington began his cross-examination. You testified that you lost your position at Phillips Industries for refusing to sign off on safety violations. Yet company records indicate you were terminated for insubordination after repeated conflicts with management. Which is true? Ethan met his gaze steadily. Both. I was insubordinate because I refused to falsify safety reports. And this led to your financial ruin, did it not? The loss of your contracting business, near foreclosure on your home, a period of depression during which your son lived with relatives. Ethan's hands clenched slightly. Yes, I struggled after being blacklisted in my industry. I rebuilt my life as a carpenter. A significant step down for a former executive, surely. One might understand how such a fall could breed resentment, even fantasies of revenge. Objection, Chen called. Counsel is testifying. Sustained, Judge Martinez ruled sharply. Harrington smiled thinly. Mr. Morgan, what exactly do you hope to gain from your involvement with Mrs. Phillips? Ethan considered the question. Nothing beyond what I already have. The knowledge that I helped someone in need, as others once helped me. Noble, Harrington said with thinly veiled sarcasm. Yet you stand to gain a business partner with valuable design skills, a ready-made family for your son, and the satisfaction of taking something precious from James Phillips. Quite a coincidence that your White Knight act serves your interests so perfectly. Ethan leaned forward slightly. There was nothing calculated about pulling 3 terrified children from a burning house, Mr. Harrington. Nothing strategic about watching a woman flinch at sudden movements because her husband taught her that raised voices lead to raised hands. His voice remained steady, but his eyes burned. You can question my motives all day, but you can't change what I've seen. By the time both sides presented their closing arguments, the atmosphere in the courtroom was charged with tension. Judge Martinez studied her notes for several long moments before looking up. This court takes allegations of domestic abuse extremely seriously. Equally seriously, we take the fundamental right of parents to raise their children. She removed her glasses, rubbing the bridge of her nose. The evidence presented today is troubling and contradictory. Mrs. Phillips presents compelling testimony about abuse, but limited corroborating evidence. Mr. Phillips offers an impressive facade of concern, but has failed to explain several disturbing inconsistencies. She replaced her glasses. I am not prepared to make a final ruling today. Instead, I am ordering the following. First, temporary custody of the children will remain with Mrs. Phillips, with supervised visitation for Mr. Phillips to be arranged through the court. Second, both parties will undergo psychological evaluation by the court's appointed expert. Third, the children will be interviewed by a child psychologist specializing in trauma. Fourth, I am issuing a temporary restraining order prohibiting Mr. Phillips from approaching either Mrs. Phillips or Mr. Morgan's residences or places of business. She fixed James with a piercing stare. And let me be very clear, Mr. Phillips. If evidence emerges connecting you in any way to the fire at Mr. Morgan's property, this court will view it as definitive proof of your unfitness as a parent. Do I make myself understood? Perfectly, Your Honor, James replied, his expression unreadable. Court is adjourned until evaluations are complete. We will reconvene in 30 days. As they filed out of the courtroom, Katherine felt simultaneously exhausted and electrified. They hadn't won, not yet, but they hadn't lost either. James's carefully crafted image had shown its first public cracks. It went as well as we could hope, Chen said quietly as they navigated past reporters. The judge saw through his performance. Now we build our case further. Outside, rain had begun to fall, a gentle patter against the courthouse steps. Sheriff Donovan waited with his cruiser to drive them back to the cabin. As they approached, Katherine noticed James standing near the parking lot, his attorney whispering urgently in his ear. Their eyes met across the distance. For the first time since she'd known him, Katherine didn't look away first. Something flickered in James's expression, Surprise, perhaps, or the first inkling that his control was truly slipping. Ethan's hand found hers, warm and steady. "One day at a time," he murmured, and she nodded, allowing herself to be guided into the sheriff's car. The battle had only just begun, but for the first time, Katherine believed they might win. The days following the hearing settled into a new rhythm. Katherine and the children remained in the cabin, while Ethan and Owen stayed with Sheriff Donovan. The separation was practical, removing any ammunition for James's attorneys about improper living arrangements, but emotionally difficult for all of them, especially the children who had grown accustomed to their blended family. "How much longer do we have to live apart?" Sophie asked one evening as Katherine braided her hair. At 10, she understood more than her siblings about the legal complexities. "Just until the judge makes her final decision," Katherine explained, securing the braid with an elastic. "It's important that we follow all the rules right now." "But we'll still be with Ethan and Owen after, right? Even when we win?" The question caught Katherine off guard. "Is that what you want?" Sophie nodded emphatically. "Owen's like my brother now, and Ethan doesn't yell or make scary faces when we make mistakes. He just shows us how to fix them." Katherine's heart squeezed with a mixture of joy and pain. "That's what dads are supposed to do, sweetheart." "I know," Sophie said, turning to face her mother. "That's why he's better at being a dad than father is." The simple clarity of a child's assessment brought tears to Katherine's eyes. She hugged her daughter close, marveling at the resilience of children when given safety and stability. Meanwhile, the court-ordered psychological evaluations proceeded. Dr. Eleanor Winters, a silver-haired woman with kind eyes and an uncompromising manner, spent hours interviewing each of them. The children's sessions were private, but Katherine imagined they were similar to her own, probing questions about her childhood, her marriage, her parenting style, her relationship with Ethan. "You understand why these questions are necessary," Dr. Winters said after a particularly difficult session exploring Katherine's failure to leave earlier. "The court needs to distinguish between genuine abuse and convenient allegations." "I understand," Katherine replied, exhausted. "But living through something and proving it happened are very different challenges." Dr. Winters studied her thoughtfully. "Indeed they are. That's precisely why my job exists." 2 weeks into the evaluation process, Rebecca Chen called with unexpected news. "We've had a development," she said, her voice tight with suppressed excitement. "A former employee of Phillips Industries has come forward, Andrea Morales. She was James's executive assistant for 7 years, including during the time Ethan worked there." "What does she say?" Katherine asked, heart pounding. "She has documentation, emails, memos, recordings, proving that James deliberately targeted Ethan for reporting safety violations. But more importantly, she has evidence of James's controlling behavior toward you. She witnessed incidents, Katherine. She's willing to testify." Hope bloomed in Katherine's chest. "Why now? After all this time?" "She says the news coverage of your case finally gave her the courage. Apparently, she left Phillips Industries after James threatened her over a scheduling error. She's been afraid to speak out until now." That evening, Ethan came to the cabin for dinner, a supervised visit with Sheriff Donovan discreetly occupying himself with paperwork on the porch. As the children played a board game, Katherine told him about Andrea Morales. "I remember her," Ethan said, his brow furrowing. "Efficient, always professional, seemed completely loyal to James. Chen says she was afraid of him, just like everyone else. She has records, Ethan. Proof." His hand covered hers on the kitchen table. "This could change everything." "Or nothing," Katherine cautioned, unwilling to hope too much. "James has resources we can't imagine. He could discredit her, claim the documents are fabricated." "Maybe," Ethan acknowledged. "But every crack in his facade helps. Every person who stands up makes it easier for the next one." Their conversation was interrupted by a commotion from the children. Max had knocked over the game board, scattering pieces everywhere, and now stood rigid with terror, eyes fixed on Ethan as if expecting punishment. Ethan's response was immediate and instinctive. He knelt down to Max's level, his voice gentle. "Hey buddy, it's okay. Accidents happen. Let's clean it up together, and then we can start a new game." Max blinked rapidly, confusion replacing fear as Ethan calmly began gathering game pieces. After a moment's hesitation, the little boy joined him, relief evident in every line of his small body. Katherine watched, her throat tight with emotion. In that simple moment, a knocked-over game, a gentle response, lay all the evidence she needed about what real family should feel like. Later, as Ethan prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Chen thinks we should meet with Andrea tomorrow. Will you be okay with that? The children could stay with Martha and Bill Jenkins for the afternoon." Katherine nodded. "I need to hear what she has to say." The Maple Leaf Cafe sat on the outskirts of town, far enough from the center to avoid casual observation, but public enough to feel safe. Andrea Morales looked nothing like Katherine had expected. Petite, stylishly dressed, with an air of confident competence that belied her nervous fidgeting with her coffee cup. "Thank you for meeting us," Chen began once introductions were complete. Andrea nodded sharply. "I should have come forward years ago. The things I saw, the things I was complicit in." She shook her head. "When I saw your case in the news, I knew I couldn't stay silent anymore." "What exactly did you witness?" Chen asked. Andrea's gaze fixed on Katherine. The control was gradual but absolute. In the beginning, it was small things. James changing lunch orders Katherine had made, correcting her speech in meetings, dictating her schedule. Later it escalated. He would call her multiple times during social events, demand photographic proof of her whereabouts. She reached for her bag, removing a flash drive. "I kept records, partly to protect myself, partly because I knew someday someone would need them. There are emails where James directed me to cancel Katherine's appointments without her knowledge, to monitor her expenses, to report on her conversations with others. There's a recording of him berating her for speaking too long with a board member's wife at a charity function." Katherine's hands trembled slightly. "You recorded that?" Andrea nodded. "My office adjoined his. I heard many things. The way he spoke to you when others weren't around." She broke off. "I'm so sorry I didn't help you then." "You were afraid too," Katherine said softly, understanding completely. "There's more," Andrea continued, turning to Ethan. "About your termination. James explicitly directed the safety violations you reported. When you refused to sign off, he ordered a complete character assassination. False reports about your performance, manufactured conflicts, the blacklisting afterward. It was systematic destruction." Ethan's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened around his coffee cup. "You have proof of this too?" "Everything's documented," Andrea confirmed. "Emails, memos, recordings of meetings. James thought his technical security was impenetrable, but I worked around it. I knew someday someone would need to know the truth." "Why did you stay so long if you knew what he was doing?" Chen asked. Andrea's expression hardened. "The same reason Katherine did, I imagine. Fear, mixed with the hope that I could somehow protect others by staying inside the system. I finally left when James threatened my family directly. My brother needed cancer treatment that our company insurance covered. James implied he could find a reason to terminate my employment if I didn't correct certain financial discrepancies." She shook her head. "I left the next day and helped my brother find alternative coverage." "The evidence on this drive," Chen said carefully, "it proves both the safety violations Ethan reported and James's abusive behavior toward Katherine?" "Yes, and more." Andrea met Katherine's eyes directly. "There's evidence of financial malfeasance, tax evasion, corporate espionage. James Phillips isn't just abusive, he's criminal. I've given copies to the appropriate authorities, but I wanted you to have this for your case." As they left the cafe, Katherine felt lightheaded with the implications. "If what she's saying is true, it changes everything," Chen finished. "Not just for your custody case, but for James's entire empire. His attorneys will fight like hell to keep this evidence suppressed." "Will they succeed?" Ethan asked. Chen's smile was grimly satisfied. They can try, but I've already filed motions to admit the evidence, and given its relevance to the children's safety, Judge Martinez is likely to allow it. That night, as Katherine tucked her children into bed, she allowed herself to imagine a future where they were truly free, not just physically away from James, but legally protected from his reach. A future where Sophie could pursue her newfound love of swimming without fear, where Lily could giggle without covering her mouth, where Max could make mistakes without trembling in anticipation of punishment. A future that might include Ethan and Owen, not as temporary saviors, but as permanent family. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. She had barely begun to reclaim herself after a decade under James's control. Was she ready to build a life with someone else? Even someone as gentle and steadfast as Ethan? As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone buzzed with a message from him. "Kids asleep? Can we talk?" She stepped onto the cabin's small porch, calling him as requested. "Andrea's evidence checks out," he said without preamble when he answered. "Chen says it's solid. The DA is involved now." Katherine sank onto the porch swing. "What does that mean for us?" "It means James has bigger problems than a custody battle. Chen thinks he might be willing to negotiate now to avoid having the evidence presented in open court where the press could access it." She closed her eyes, processing the implications. "So this might end?" "One way or another," Ethan confirmed. "It might not be the vindication you deserve, but it could give you and the kids the freedom you need." "Freedom," Katherine repeated softly. The word tasted strange on her tongue after so many years of constraint. What would that even look like? Ethan was quiet for a moment. "Whatever you want it to look like, Katherine. That's the point." The underlying question hung in the silence between them. Would that freedom include him? Would she choose to build her new life alongside the man who had helped her reclaim it? "Ethan," she began hesitantly, "when this is over—" She never finished the sentence. A sharp knock at the door interrupted her, followed by Sheriff Donovan's urgent voice. "Katherine, you need to come quickly. There's been an accident." The emergency room at Maple Hills General Hospital hummed with quiet efficiency. Fluorescent lights cast a harsh glow on pale green walls as Katherine paced the small waiting area, each step measured and tense. Outside, rain lashed against the windows, a fitting backdrop to the turmoil in her heart. "Mrs. Phillips?" She turned at the sound of her name. A doctor in rumpled scrubs approached, his face bearing the weary compassion of someone accustomed to delivering difficult news. "I'm Dr. Reeves. I've been treating Mr. Morgan. How is he?" The question caught in her throat. "Stable, Dr. Reeves replied, and Katherine felt her knees weaken with relief. The impact was primarily to his left side. Broken ribs, a fractured clavicle, significant lacerations. He's very lucky. The truck could have hit him directly if he hadn't swerved at the last moment." "Truck?" Katherine echoed. Sheriff Donovan had only told her that Ethan had been in an accident while walking back from the hardware store. "What truck?" The doctor hesitated, glancing at Sheriff Donovan, who had appeared silently beside her. "The vehicle that struck Mr. Morgan left the scene," the sheriff explained quietly. A witness described it as a black pickup with tinted windows. "No plates visible." Katherine's blood ran cold. This wasn't an accident. It wasn't a question, and neither man contradicted her. "Can I see him?" she asked, already moving toward the treatment rooms. Dr. Reeves nodded. "Briefly. He's sedated but conscious. Try not to upset him. His body needs rest to heal." Ethan lay still against white sheets, his muscular frame somehow diminished by the medical equipment surrounding him. His left arm was immobilized in a sling, and a large bandage covered his forehead. Bruises were beginning to bloom along his jaw, vivid against his unusually pale skin. "Katherine!" His voice was a rasp, but his eyes focused on her with surprising clarity. She moved to his side, careful not to disturb the IV lines. "I'm here," she said softly, taking his uninjured hand. "The kid's safe," she assured him quickly. Martha Jenkins is with them at the cabin. Deputy Collins is standing guard. Relief washed over his features. Good. That's good. Katherine studied his face, noting the lines of pain etched around his eyes despite the medication. Ethan, the sheriff says a truck hit you and drove away. He nodded slightly, wincing at the movement. Black F-150, tinted windows, had been parked near the hardware store. Started following me about a block before. He trailed off, his breathing labored. Don't, Katherine urged. You need to rest. No. His fingers tightened around hers with surprising strength. Listen, the driver, I saw him just before impact. One of James's security team. Guy named Barton, ex-military. Used to accompany James to the manufacturing plant. Cold rage spread through Katherine's chest. You're sure? Positive. Ethan's eyes held hers, fierce despite the pain. He wanted me to see him, Katherine. This wasn't just an attack. It was a message. Before she could respond, a nurse appeared to adjust Ethan's medication. He needs rest, the woman said firmly. You can come back in the morning. Katherine nodded, reluctantly releasing Ethan's hand. I'll be back first thing, she promised. In the hallway, Sheriff Donovan waited with Rebecca Chen, who had arrived shortly after them. The attorney's normally composed features were tight with anger. This changes everything, Chen said without preamble. Attempted vehicular homicide is a far cry from unsubstantiated abuse allegations. If we can prove Phillips was behind this— Ethan identified the driver, Katherine interrupted. A security contractor who works for James. Barton, ex-military. Donovan's expression hardened. Malcolm Barton. I know the name from the background checks we ran on Phillips's associates. Former Special Forces, dishonorable discharge. Works private security now, primarily for Phillips Industries. Can you arrest him? Katherine asked. The sheriff sighed. Not without evidence connecting him to the scene. We're checking traffic cameras, looking for witnesses. But even if we find the truck, proving Barton was driving and that Phillips ordered the hit will be challenging. Unless, Chen interjected, a calculating gleam in her eyes, we can get James to incriminate himself. How? Katherine asked. Chen exchanged a meaningful glance with the sheriff. A confrontation. Carefully orchestrated, legally recorded. No, Donovan said immediately. Too dangerous. Not for Katherine, Chen clarified. For Andrea Morales. Phillips doesn't know she's come forward yet. If she approached him, suggested she had evidence that could implicate him in the attack on Ethan. You want to use Andrea as bait? Katherine's voice rose in disbelief. I want to give her a chance to help end this, Chen corrected. With proper precautions, of course. It's her decision, Sheriff Donovan said firmly. And we'd need to coordinate with Boston PD. This is well beyond our jurisdiction. As they debated options, Katherine felt a strange calm settling over her. For months she had been reacting, fleeing, hiding, defending. Perhaps it was time to act. I'll do it, she said suddenly, interrupting their discussion. Both turned to her in surprise. I'll confront James, she continued with growing conviction. Not Andrea, me. Absolutely not, Donovan said immediately. Chen studied her thoughtfully. Why you? Because he'll never believe Andrea had the courage to confront him directly. But me? After weeks of corrupting influence from Ethan? After finding my voice in court? He'll believe I've become bold enough to threaten him. Katherine's hands were steady as she continued. And because I know exactly which buttons to push to make him lose control. It's too dangerous, Donovan argued. Phillips is unpredictable, especially now that he's cornered. More dangerous than what we're already living through, Katherine countered. More dangerous than Ethan being hit by a truck? Than my children living in fear? This has to end, Sheriff. One way or another. Chen and Donovan exchanged a long look. If, and I mean if, we considered this, Chen said carefully, it would require extensive preparation. Police backup, recording devices, a controlled environment where Phillips couldn't harm you. And Ethan can't know, Katherine added. He'd never agree to put me at risk. For good reason, Donovan muttered. Sheriff. Katherine said quietly. You have children. What wouldn't you do to protect them? The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable and profound. Dawn broke over Maple Hills, painting the storm clouds with streaks of pink and gold. Katherine stood at the cabin window, watching as the first light touched the glistening wet leaves outside. She hadn't slept. Her mind had been too full of plans, contingencies, and the quiet certainty that today would change everything. Her phone buzzed, a text from Chen. It's arranged. 11 a.m. at the Grand Hotel conference room in Boston. Phillips believes it's a negotiation session with just attorneys present. Katherine closed her eyes briefly, steadying herself. Then she moved to wake the children for school, maintaining the pretense of normalcy while her heart raced with purpose. After dropping the children at school with extra hugs and whispered, "I love yous" that earned her curious looks, Katherine drove to the hospital. Ethan was awake, sitting up slightly despite obvious discomfort. "You should be resting," she chided gently, settling into the chair beside his bed. "Hard to rest when your ribs stab you every time you breathe," he replied with a grimace that was trying to be a smile. "The kids get off to school okay?" She nodded, taking his hand. "Sophie was worried about you. I promised we'd visit this afternoon." Guilt flickered across his face. "I'm sorry. I should have been more careful, more aware of my surroundings." "This is not your fault," Katherine said firmly. "None of it is." They sat in comfortable silence for a few moments, the beeping of monitors creating a rhythmic backdrop. "Chen called," Ethan said finally. "Andrea's evidence has James spooked. His lawyers have reached out about a potential settlement." Katherine's heart skipped. "What kind of settlement?" "Full custody for you. Generous support. No restrictions on where you live." He squeezed her hand. "You'd be free, Katherine. Really free." She studied his face, memorizing the familiar lines, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners, the stubble darkening his jaw after days without proper grooming. And what does he want in return? The evidence stays sealed. No criminal charges. His reputation intact. So he walks away, free to do the same thing to someone else. Ethan sighed, then winced at the movement. "It's not perfect justice, but it might be the best outcome for you and the kids." Katherine leaned forward, pressing a gentle kiss to his forehead. "What if there's another way? A way to make sure he can't hurt anyone again?" Wariness crept into Ethan's expression. "What are you thinking?" "Just considering all options," she said, carefully neutral. "Chen wants to discuss strategies this morning." "Katherine," Ethan said slowly, "promise me you won't do anything reckless." She met his gaze steadily. "I promise I'll do whatever is necessary to protect our family." The word "our" hung between them, significant and uncontested. "I should go," she said, rising. "Chen's waiting. I'll be back this afternoon with the children." At the door, she paused, looking back at him. "Ethan, thank you for everything, for showing me what strength really looks like." His brow furrowed slightly at her tone. "Katherine, I'll see you soon," she said, and slipped away before her resolve could waver. Outside the hospital, Sheriff Donovan waited in his personal vehicle, an unmarked SUV rather than his patrol car. "Last chance to reconsider," he said as she slid into the passenger seat. Katherine fastened her seatbelt with steady hands. "Let's go." The drive to Boston passed in tense silence. Katherine watched the familiar landscape change from rural to suburban to urban, each mile bringing her closer to the confrontation she had spent years avoiding. "The room is wired for audio and video," Donovan explained as they neared the city. "Boston PD will have officers positioned nearby but out of sight. Chen will be monitoring from the adjacent room with a detective. They'll intervene if things escalate." Katherine nodded, mentally rehearsing what she needed to say, the precise buttons she needed to push to make James reveal his true nature. "Your safety is the priority," Donovan continued. "If at any point you feel threatened, use the code word apology, and we'll end it immediately." The Grand Hotel rose before them, a towering edifice of glass and steel in the heart of Boston's financial district. As they pulled up to the entrance, Katherine felt a familiar constriction in her chest, the physical response to years of entering this building on James's arm, perfect smile fixed in place, internal trembling carefully concealed. "Ready?" Donovan asked, studying her with concern. Katherine drew a deep breath. "Yes." The conference room was on the 30th floor, neutral territory chosen specifically for this confrontation. Chen waited in a service room down the hall, surrounded by monitoring equipment and two plainclothes detectives. "Remember," she instructed as a technician fitted Katherine with a nearly invisible wireless microphone. "We need him to explicitly acknowledge ordering the attack on Ethan. Anything less won't be enough." "I understand," Katherine replied, unusually calm now that the moment had arrived. "He'll be here in 5 minutes," one of the detectives reported, checking his phone. "Elevator just reached the lobby." Chen squeezed Katherine's hand. "You can still back out." "No," Katherine said simply. "I can't." She entered the conference room alone, taking a seat at the massive mahogany table that dominated the space. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Boston Harbor, the water glittering in the late morning sun. Katherine positioned herself with her back to the door, a deliberate choice. James would have to walk around to face her, a subtle power play he would recognize immediately. The door opened precisely at 11 o'clock. Katherine didn't turn, listening instead to the familiar cadence of expensive shoes on marble, the slight clearing of a throat that always preceded James's calculated speech. "Katherine." His voice was neutral, giving nothing away. "I expected our attorneys." She turned slowly, meeting his gaze with a steadiness that visibly surprised him. James looked immaculate as always, tailored suit, perfectly knotted tie, not a hair out of place. Only the tightness around his eyes betrayed the strain of recent weeks. "I thought we should speak directly," she replied, "before lawyers muddy the waters further." James studied her for a long moment before taking the seat across from her. He placed his hands on the table, manicured nails catching the light. No wedding ring, she noticed. He'd already erased her from his life. "I'm listening," he said, the practiced patience in his tone so familiar it made her skin crawl. Katherine met his gaze unflinchingly. "I know what you did, James." To Ethan, the hit and run wasn't subtle. Something flickered briefly in his eyes before his expression smoothed into professional concern. "I heard about Morgan's unfortunate accident. Distressing, of course, but hardly relevant to our negotiations." "Not an accident," Katherine pressed. "Your man Barton was identified at the scene." James leaned back slightly, his posture relaxed, but his eyes sharp. "That's a serious accusation, Katherine. The kind that requires evidence. We have it," she bluffed smoothly. "Traffic cameras, an eyewitness. And more importantly, we have Andrea Morales." The flash of genuine surprise on James's face was deeply satisfying. "Andrea is a disgruntled former employee with mental health issues," he recovered quickly. "Hardly a reliable witness." "Andrea kept records, James, of everything, including your instructions regarding Ethan Morgan 8 years ago. And your methods with me." James's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Whatever Andrea may have told you, her interpretation of events is severely distorted." "Is that what you told Barton?" Katherine asked, deliberately goading him now. "To severely distort Ethan Morgan? Or were the instructions more specific? Break his legs, put him in the hospital, maybe something permanent?" James's nostrils flared, the only visible sign of his rising anger. "This conversation is unproductive. If you have actual evidence of wrongdoing, your attorney should present it through proper channels." "We intend to," Katherine assured him, "along with the financial records Andrea preserved. The tax evasion alone could put you away for years, James, not to mention the unsafe manufacturing practices Ethan refused to sign off on. The families of workers who were injured might be very interested in those documents." James leaned forward slightly, his voice lowering. "What do you want, Katherine? Money? Fine. Name your price." "I want what you can't buy," she replied steadily. "Safety for my children, freedom from fear, justice for what you've done." A cold smile played at the corners of his mouth. Noble sentiments. "But everyone has a price, even your precious Ethan Morgan." "Leave him out of this," Katherine said sharply, exactly as planned. "Show vulnerability. Give James an opening to attack." He seized it immediately, his smile widening. "Ah, there it is. You care for him. How touching. The damsel and her rescuer, building furniture in a quaint little town." His voice hardened. "Did you really think I'd let you humiliate me like this? Let you take my children and play house with a small-town nobody who couldn't even protect his own career?" Katherine maintained her composure with effort. "This isn't about you, James. It's about the children and their right to grow up without fear." "My children," he corrected icily. "Mine to raise, mine to discipline. Your job was to support my vision for their futures, not undermine it with your weakness." "Hitting a child isn't discipline," Katherine countered. "Terrorizing your wife isn't strength." James's careful facade began to crack, real anger seeping through. "You have no idea what strength is. I built an empire while you arranged flowers and planned dinner parties. I created a legacy while you coddled the children into mediocrity." "You hurt them," Katherine said simply. "And me, for years. I molded them," he snapped, "into something worthy of the Phillips name. Until you stole them away to that backwater town to live in squalor with your carpenter boyfriend." "Almost there," Katherine thought. "Just a little more pressure." "Ethan is twice the man you are," she said deliberately. "He builds things that last. He treats the children with respect. He would never hire someone to commit violence on his behalf." James stood abruptly, looming over her. For the first time, Katherine didn't flinch away from his intimidation tactic. Instead, she met his gaze calmly. "That self-righteous son of a bitch has been a thorn in my side for 8 years, James snarled, control slipping further. "He cost me millions with his ethical concerns. He corrupted you, turned you against me, poisoned my children's minds." "No, James," Katherine replied, rising to face him. "You did all that yourself." His composure shattered completely. Morgan got exactly what he deserved. A warning that should have been heeded. Next time, Barton won't just clip him. Next time, the conference room door burst open. 2 plainclothes detectives entered, followed by Rebecca Chen and Sheriff Donovan. "James Phillips," one detective announced formally. "You're under arrest for conspiracy to commit aggravated assault and attempted murder. You have the right to remain silent." James's face contorted with shock and rage as he realized the trap. His gaze locked on Katherine, pure hatred burning in his eyes. "You set me up," he hissed as the detectives approached. "You manipulated me." "I learned from the best," Katherine replied softly. As the detectives handcuffed him, James made one last desperate attempt. "This won't stick," he spat. "I'll have the best lawyers money can buy. Your word against mine." "Actually," Chen interjected, nodding toward the ceiling where a nearly invisible camera was mounted, "it's your word against your own, quite clearly recorded." Sheriff Donovan stepped forward protectively as the detectives led James away, still threatening legal retaliation. Once the door closed behind them, Katherine's carefully maintained composure crumbled. She sank back into her chair, trembling with delayed reaction. "You did it," Chen said, genuine admiration in her voice. "That was extraordinary, Katherine." "Is it enough?" she asked, her voice unsteady. "Will it hold up? The confession, combined with Andrea's evidence and the eyewitness identification? Absolutely. He's facing serious charges, conspiracy to commit assault, attempted murder, not to mention the financial crimes that will come to light during investigation." Katherine nodded, still processing the enormity of what had just occurred. After years of careful submission, of modulating her voice and controlling her opinions to avoid his rage, she had deliberately provoked James into revealing his true nature, and won. "I need to get back," she said suddenly. "To Ethan, To the children, Sheriff Donovan nodded. I'll drive you. The Boston detectives will handle the rest here. The return journey to Maple Hills passed in a blur of emotional exhaustion and stunned relief. Katherine watched the city recede, realizing she felt no nostalgia for the luxury she was leaving behind. Her life there had been a gilded cage, beautiful but confining. Freedom, she was discovering, looked like a small town with muddy roads and neighbors who brought casseroles when you were in trouble. It looked like a workshop filled with sawdust and possibility, like children laughing without restraint. It looked like Ethan's steady hands, creating beauty from raw materials. At the hospital, she found him sitting up in bed, looking restless and worried. When he saw her, relief washed over his features. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "The kids said you didn't pick them up from school. Martha did. Chen's not answering my calls. The sheriff's been AWOL all day." Katherine moved to his side, taking his hand in hers. "I have something to tell you, and you're going to be angry with me at first." His expression grew wary. "What did you do?" Carefully, she explained the confrontation with James, the recorded confession, the arrest. With each revelation, Ethan's face shifted from disbelief to fear to a kind of stunned pride. "You could have been hurt," he said when she finished. "If he'd snapped completely—" "But he didn't," she interrupted gently. "And now he can't hurt any of us anymore." Ethan shook his head slowly. "I don't know whether to be furious that you risked yourself or in awe of your courage." "Both are acceptable reactions," Katherine said with a small smile, "as long as you understand why I had to do it myself." He studied her face for a long moment. "I do understand. This was your battle to finish." His free hand reached up to touch her cheek. "But please, never again. My heart can't take it." She leaned into his touch. "No more battles. Just rebuilding." Together? The question contained multitudes, a past acknowledged, a present cherished, a future offered. "Together," Katherine confirmed, sealing the promise with a kiss. In the weeks that followed, James's empire began to crumble. The criminal charges expanded as investigators uncovered the full scope of his financial malfeasance. Former employees, emboldened by his arrest, came forward with their own stories of intimidation and ethical violations. The board of Phillips Industries voted to remove him as CEO, desperate to salvage the company's reputation. Meanwhile, life in Maple Hills continued with remarkable normalcy. The children finished the school year with improving grades and growing confidence. Sophie joined the swim team for summer competitions. Lily discovered a passion for sketching, filling notebooks with increasingly skillful drawings. Max stopped flinching at sudden movements, his nightmares gradually replaced by peaceful sleep. Ethan recovered from his injuries, though certain movements still caused him pain. He and Katherine continued their furniture business, their complementary skills creating pieces that were beginning to attract attention beyond the local community. On a warm evening in late June, nearly 4 months after Katherine and her children had first arrived in Maple Hills, the town gathered at the lake for the annual summer festival. Lanterns hung from trees, casting a golden glow over picnic tables loaded with potluck contributions. Children darted between groups of chatting adults, their laughter a constant backdrop to the celebration. Katherine sat with Martha Jenkins and Sarah Donovan, watching as Ethan taught Max how to roast the perfect marshmallow over the communal bonfire. Owen and Sophie were engaged in what appeared to be a serious conversation with the swim coach, while Lily showed her latest drawings to old Mr. Jenkins. "They've settled in beautifully," Martha observed, following Katherine's gaze. "You'd never know what they've been through." "Children are resilient," Sarah agreed. "With the right support." Katherine nodded, grateful beyond words for this community that had embraced them so completely. "We've been incredibly fortunate." "Luck had nothing to do with it," Martha said firmly. "You fought for them, for yourself, for this life you're building." Before Katherine could respond, Sheriff Donovan approached their table, his expression unusually solemn. "Ladies," he greeted them, nodding to his wife and Martha before focusing on Katherine. Got a call from the Boston DA's office today. Thought you should know. James has accepted a plea deal. Katherine's heart skipped. What kind of deal? 10 years for the financial crimes and conspiracy to commit assault. Full restitution to all parties harmed by the business practices. And most importantly for you, relinquishment of all parental rights. Full, uncontested custody for you. The words washed over her like a wave, leaving her momentarily breathless. It's really over? Donovan nodded. His lawyers advised him it was the best option given the evidence. Trial would have meant public exposure of everything. The abuse, the corporate crimes, all of it. His reputation wouldn't have survived. Thank you, Katherine said, reaching out to squeeze the sheriff's hand. For everything you've done for us. He shrugged, uncomfortable with gratitude as always. Just doing my job. Though I might take credit for introducing you to Rebecca Chen, that woman is a force of nature. After he moved on, Katherine sat quietly, processing the news. Behind her, she heard Ethan's distinctive laugh mingling with Max's high-pitched giggle. The sound wrapped around her heart like a promise. Are you all right? Martha asked gently, noting her silence. Yes, Katherine replied, surprised to find it completely true. Better than all right, actually. She excused herself, drawn inexorably toward the bonfire, where Ethan was now demonstrating to an enthralled Max how to make a s'more. As she approached, Ethan looked up, his expression warming at the sight of her. Just in time, he said, making room for her on the log beside him. Max is about to attempt his first s'more creation. It's a milestone event. Katherine settled beside them, accepting the sticky marshmallow Max proudly offered her. I just heard from Sheriff Donovan, she said quietly. James took a plea deal. 10 years. And he's relinquishing all parental rights. Ethan's eyes widened, understanding the significance immediately. So you're free. Completely free. We all are, she corrected, including Max in her smile. Later, as the festival wound down and sleepy children were gathered for the journey home, Ethan and Katherine found themselves alone by the water's edge. The moon cast a silver path across the lake, peaceful and luminous. I have a question, Ethan said, taking her hand in his. Now that the future's wide open, what do you want it to look like? Katherine considered the question, truly considering her desires without constraint for perhaps the first time in her adult life. I want this, she said simply. Maple Hills, the business we're building, the children growing up with space to become themselves. She turned to face him fully. You. The smile that spread across his face held no reservation, no shadow. I was hoping you'd say that. From his pocket, he withdrew a small wooden box, intricately carved with a pattern of intertwining leaves and branches. I made this while I was recovering. Had a lot of time to think about what matters. Katherine accepted the box with trembling fingers. Inside, nestled on velvet, lay a ring, not diamond and platinum like the one James had placed on her finger a decade ago, but something far more precious. A band of polished wood inlaid with a delicate silver pattern. It's not expensive, Ethan said, a hint of uncertainty in his voice. But it's made from the oak tree that survived the fire. Something that endured like us. It's perfect, Katherine whispered, emotion closing her throat. We don't have to rush, Ethan assured her. After everything you've been through, I understand if you need time. Katherine silenced him with a kiss. I've spent 10 years living someone else's vision of my life, she said when they parted. I don't want to waste another day not living my own. Ethan's arms encircled her, strong and gentle. Is that a yes? It's a yes, she confirmed. For all of us. The moon continued its arc across the sky, bearing witness to their embrace. Two people who had found each other in the aftermath of destruction and discovered that sometimes what rises from the ashes is stronger and more beautiful than what came before. The late September sun cast long shadows across what remained of Ethan's property. Blackened timber and twisted metal marked where the house had once stood. But today, the scene buzzed with new energy. Dozens of townspeople moved with organized efficiency, transforming destruction into possibility. Sheriff Donovan had called it an old-fashioned barn raising, though they weren't building a barn. Men from the lumber yard, construction workers, electricians, and plumbers had volunteered their services. Women organized food stations, children carried tools, and even elderly residents supervised from lawn chairs, calling out suggestions and encouragement. Katherine stood slightly apart, overwhelmed by the display of community strength. 4 months had passed since James's arrest and subsequent plea deal. 4 months of healing, planning, and rebuilding. Not just structures, but lives. Amazing, isn't it? Ethan said, joining her. His burns had healed remarkably well, though the scars remained visible when he rolled up his sleeves to work. "I've never seen anything like this," Katherine admitted. "All these people giving up their Saturday for us." "For family," Ethan corrected gently. "That's how they see us now." Katherine watched as Sophie helped Mrs. Jenkins arrange flowers for the lunch tables, confidence radiating from her once timid daughter. Nearby, Lily and Max played with other children their age, their laughter free and uninhibited. Owen worked alongside the men, proudly carrying his father's smaller tools, his chest puffed with importance. "He's growing up so fast," she observed. Ethan nodded, a mixture of pride and wistfulness in his expression. Too fast, but in all the right ways. A truck pulled up carrying limestone for the new foundation. Katherine recognized it as part of the settlement funds James had been forced to pay as restitution. She had insisted on using it to rebuild what he had destroyed. "I made some adjustments to the plans," she said tentatively, pulling folded blueprints from her pocket. "If that's all right." Ethan studied her changes with growing appreciation. She had expanded the workshop space, added a sunlit studio corner, and most significantly, designed the home to accommodate all 6 of them permanently. "It's perfect," he said softly. "Are you sure? It's your land, your home." "Our home," she corrected. "If that's what you want." Ethan's hand found hers, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Our home," he repeated, the simple words carrying profound meaning. Mayor Thompson approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Foundation team's ready whenever you are, Ethan." The cornerstone ceremony was simple but meaningful. Ethan and Katherine stood together, surrounded by their children and the entire community. Sheriff Donovan presented them with a small metal box. "For the foundation," he explained, "something of meaning to anchor the new home." One by one, they added items. Owen placed a small wooden carving he'd made with his father. Sophie contributed a sketch of all 6 of them together. Lily added a shell from their first trip to the lake, and Max a colorful stone he treasured. Katherine hesitated before adding her contribution. The silver wedding band James had once used to claim her as property, now transformed. She had melted it down and recast it into small charms for each child, symbols of how destruction could become creation with enough courage and determination. "For new beginnings," she whispered. Ethan placed a photograph of Claire, smiling from beneath her favorite oak tree. "For remembering where we came from," he explained to the children, who nodded with solemn understanding. As the box was sealed and placed within the cornerstone, Ethan addressed the gathered community. "Thank you isn't enough, but it's what we have to offer. This home will always have an open door for each of you who helped rebuild it." Mayor Thompson stepped forward. "Before we continue, there's one more item of business." He produced an official-looking document. "The town council met yesterday. In light of recent events, we voted unanimously to appoint Ethan Morgan as our new building inspector and safety commissioner." Murmurs of approval spread through the crowd. "It's about time someone with actual integrity filled that position," old Mr. Jenkins called out. Ethan stood speechless, the significance not lost on him. The very skills and principles that James Phillips had punished him for would now become his livelihood. Later, as community members continued working on the foundation, Katherine found Ethan standing beneath the old oak tree that had miraculously survived the fire. "You deserve this," she said quietly. "All of it." Ethan turned to her, emotion raw in his eyes. "So do you. So do they." Together they watched their children playing among the construction materials, already claiming the skeleton of their new home as their own. The future stretched before them, not perfect or without challenges, but theirs to build together, one carefully placed stone at a time. 2 months later, on a crisp November morning painted in shades of amber and gold, the new Morgan Phillips house stood nearly complete. Though smaller than Katherine's former mansion, it possessed something her old home never had: genuine warmth that emanated from every carefully crafted corner. Today marked a special occasion. Not a housewarming exactly, but something more meaningful. Ethan had been mysterious about the plans, simply asking everyone to gather at the property at noon. Katherine stood at the kitchen window, watching the children help Ethan in the side yard. They had spent the morning digging a large hole, their faces serious with concentration. Whatever Ethan had planned clearly had their complete support. "Everything ready?" she asked, stepping onto the porch with a thermos of hot cider. Ethan nodded, dirt smudging his cheek. "Just about." He gestured toward a burlap-wrapped object leaning against the tool shed. "That's the last piece." By noon, nearly half the town had arrived, gathering in a loose circle around the freshly dug hole. Sheriff Donovan, Mayor Thompson, the teachers, shopkeepers, and neighbors who had become their extended family all stood expectantly as Ethan stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming," he began, voice steady but full of emotion. "When we lost our home, we didn't just lose walls and a roof. We lost history, memories, the physical foundation of our lives." Katherine moved closer, sensing the depth of what was coming. "But what we've gained," Ethan continued, "is something far more valuable." He gestured to Katherine and the children. "A new family, a second chance." He unwrapped the burlap, revealing a young oak sapling, its roots carefully packed in soil. "This tree comes from the same forest where Claire and I used to walk, where Owen took his first steps. It's a piece of our past." Katherine's eyes filled with tears as she understood. "Today we're planting this tree not to replace what was lost, but to mark what's been found," Ethan explained. "As it grows, so will we, together." He motioned the children forward. Each took a turn shoveling soil around the sapling after it was placed in the prepared hole. Owen went first, then Sophie, Lily, and finally little Max, who required Ethan's help to manage the heavy shovel. When it was Katherine's turn, Ethan handed her something unexpected: a small handcrafted wooden box with intricate carving along its edges. "What's this?" she whispered. "Open it," he encouraged gently. Inside nestled 5 hand-carved wooden hearts, each with a name: Ethan, Katherine, Owen, Sophie, Lily, and Max. "I've been working on these at night," he explained. "One for each of us. I thought we could bury them with the tree roots. A promise to stay rooted together, no matter what storms come." Katherine couldn't speak, overwhelmed by the simple perfection of the gesture. Instead, she knelt beside the sapling, placing the box carefully among its roots. The children added their handfuls of soil, then stepped back as Ethan finished securing the young tree with stakes and wire. Mayor Thompson stepped forward, clearing his throat. "In keeping with town tradition, I propose we name this the Promise Tree, as a reminder that some vows don't require legal papers to be binding." He glanced meaningfully at Ethan and Katherine. The gathered townspeople murmured approval, many wiping away tears. As the afternoon continued with shared food and conversation, Katherine found Ethan standing alone beside the newly planted tree. "Thank you," she said simply. "For what?" he asked. "For showing us that family isn't built of perfect materials, but with perfect intention." She reached for his hand. "For giving my children roots when they thought they'd only ever have wings." Ethan's fingers intertwined with hers, warm and strong. Some things were meant to grow together, he said softly, looking from the sapling to the children playing nearby. I think we're one of them. As the November sun began its early descent, casting long shadows across their new home, the promise tree stood as testament to their journey. From fear to courage, from isolation to community, from broken pieces to something whole and beautiful. The road ahead would hold challenges, of course. There would be difficult days, uncomfortable adjustments, the work of blending families. The children would face their own struggles, processing trauma and building trust. Katherine would continue reclaiming her voice, her confidence, her dreams. But today, watching their children laugh freely beneath the darkening sky, Katherine and Ethan shared the quiet certainty that whatever came next, they would face it as they had already faced so much. Together, roots intertwined, growing stronger with each season. And that, perhaps, was the most profound promise of all.